Hi, how are you? I'm
Hi.
Mary. Hi, I'm Mary Huddleston, also known as Mrs. Southern Social. I am so excited to be on the Big Wedding Planning Podcast. I am a retired wedding planner. I spent over a decade planning weddings in Dallas and then in Nashville, Tennessee, where then I opened a party rental company with my husband. We are now the largest event rental company in Tennessee. We service the entire Southeast. And I also have a novel that has just been debuted called Without a Hitch, based on my experience as a wedding planner for the rich and famous. And the second novel comes out in 2023, which is a sequel. I also have a tabletop line coming out with Dillard's in about a month. So,
Oh,
yes, for Southern Living.
wow. Mary, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here and so honored.
So clearly every day for you is boring. You have nothing to do.
So boring.
Right.
So boring.
Right. I'm so sorry for you, Mary.
I mean, parties are my life. So
Yes.
there's worse jobs you can have.
Absolutely. I do believe that. Yeah, parties are good. I'm really happy. I mean, listen, you've got a lot of success already, despite the fact that we're coming out of this crazy pandemic where live events were just screwed for quite a while. So kudos to you.
Correct. Yes, it hasn't been the best 2 years, probably on the party rental side. However, it's been really interesting. Mrs. Southern Social, my blog and social media persona has really exploded during that time because everyone was hosting smaller events at home. So it's been interesting how while, the big events were happening, entertaining at home really became a thing. And so I was able to kind of pivot, and now I'm pivoting back more onto the bigger events because parties with a revenge, that's really what we're calling the next couple of years. It is the roaring 20s. Or it's happening because of all the delayed weddings, and people are ready to get back together.
Oh, yes, they are, girl. Parties without a revenge. I like this.
The revenge party season is what we're calling it for all the wedding vendors.
The revenge party season. I love it. Well, especially this year, 2021, is nuts.
It is. It is because, a lot of people, not only were there all the new engagements and, parties that are resuming from the social side, all the galas and fundraisers and that kind of thing, but so many of the delayed weddings and weddings that were pushed back. So there really is not a weekend open in 2022, which is a good and a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Okay. So Miss Southern Social, that is really, really cool. Are you in Nashville right now? That's where you live?
I am. I'm based in Nashville. Correct.
I love Nashville so much.
It's a fun city. It's in the past couple of years become the bachelorette capital of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So Nashville's having a moment for sure, which is great. Again, from the party rental side of things, it's fantastic. We actually have more destination weddings now than we do locals getting married.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes, it's a main spot for destinations.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, good. So it's Miss Southern Social. Why am I not pulling them up? Mrs. I have your Mrs. Oh, I have too many S's. I have too many S's.
There are a lot of S's.
I have a problem. Oh, look how cute you are. Okay. So this is awesome. The ultimate wedding guide to wedding planning. Look at all these great resources, people. Check it out, Mrs. Southern Social.
So I try to balance on Mrs. Southern Social. Again, my background is in wedding planning, but I don't do that anymore. I'm retired. But I still, we get asked all the time about weddings, and it applies to so many things. Even just, people wanting to know, what do I need to set a table? Like, what kind of china should I have, regardless if you're getting married or not. So we try to include wedding content, especially with the release of the book, since that is, focused on weddings.
Yeah.
But we talk about everyday entertaining. And, my focus became over during, the past few years was really, I felt like there was this hole in the market for women that wanted to entertain like their mothers and grandmothers did, but we don't have time to bake from scratch or to make food from scratch all the time. I'm not hand polishing silver anymore. So it's kind of how to entertain like our moms and grandmothers did, but for the modern Southern woman and what that looks like. So we're all about delegating tips and tricks. And again, that also carries over to weddings.
Yeah, it does. Very cool. And then the name of your rental company?
Please be seated.
Please be seated.
All spelled out. Please
yeah.
be seated.
Please be seated, which is also a really great website. And I'm looking forward to having you come on in the future so we can talk about rentals, because that's a whole nother subject.
It really is. And you know, it's interesting. I actually once did a lecture at Vanderbilt. They asked me to speak for 2 hours on tabletop. Let me tell you, you have to get very creative. But I do know so much about tabletop now, and like tips and tricks on, you know, where to spend your money. And Please Be Seated got started because when I moved to Nashville, I realized this was now 7 years ago. When I moved back here, I'm from here, but lived and worked in Dallas for a long time. Hence the basis of the book and where I really got my start in eventing. But when I moved back to Nashville, I realized there were no high-end rentals like what we had available to us in Dallas. And there were options in Atlanta, but not in Nashville. And the market was really growing. The money's always been here. People just don't know what they don't know. And so we started with kind of boutique high-end rentals at luxury bars, you know, more interesting dining chair options. And in Nashville, they like couldn't get enough. And so we expanded into all rentals, and it's really having a moment, you know, interesting rentals. And I mean, it's the sky's the limit. You see what's happening in California and New York, and there's just so many options now that, to your point, yes, I think it's really nice sometimes to people to have almost like a cheat sheet of like, what do we really need? And like, oh my goodness, I didn't think that this was all, you know, sometimes people think when you have a tinted wedding, you're going to save a lot of money, but you really don't, because you have to do everything from scratch. I'm sure you address that. So, you know, I feel like rentals it's not super sexy all the time. You don't think, but it's a huge part of your event.
I love it. I love doing the rentals. I love it.
It's fun now.
Except when it's the boring part, like, you know, how many glasses are we going to need at the bar and the dining table and, you know,
and talking about hot boxes and tray jacks and like the stuff that doesn't look good and it's just a necessary evil. Yeah.
But you got to do it. You got to do it.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. But what you're here to talk to us about today is this new book, Without a Hitch, which if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've probably heard me say a lot of times, I'm not a good reader. I know how to read. It's just that, well, like the other day we were in the car taking a drive and I thought, oh, I'll bring the book, you know, and I'll read the book. And I started reading the book. The problem when I read any literature, right, with, you know, the words in front of my eyes is that I fall asleep or I don't remember what I read.
Thankfully, there's an Audible version.
Yes. I put it on Audible. I put it on Audible.
Perfect.
I love it.
You know, and the woman that does the reading is fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, she's a professional. Reading fiction is very different than nonfiction, which is why we have a professional, you know, reading the book. But I feel like that also speaks to the modern day woman. I don't have a lot of time to read either. And when I do, to your point, it's late at night and I'm about to go to sleep.
Right.
I love an audiobook. I mean, when you're folding laundry or doing dishes or in the car at carpool, like, so yes, there is an Audible version of the novel and it's a comedy. And I think right now more than ever, we could all use a reason to laugh. And, you know, like I said, parties are back with a vengeance. So the release of this book has been great. People are really into like over the top events again. And that's really what this book speaks to.
Yeah. So basically speak to that even more. Like this is based on not 100% true, but a lot of experiences you had.
Correct. It is it is inspired by my career in the world of over the top events. You know, when I was doing these events years and years and years ago, I was very fortunate. The people that I worked with were just the best of the best. And we were based in Dallas, but we went all over the country and we did these over the top weddings. And I would tell my friends stories at night when, you know, I was young and we'd go out to the bars after the weddings. It'd be, you know, midnight and people couldn't get enough. They'd be like, there's no way that happened. That can't be real. And you're like, there's no way anybody would make this up. Like, it is so ridiculous. And so the book is inspired off of my career, and my co-author was also, she was in the world of celebrity journalism, and kind of the same thing. The things that she was writing about were just crazy, over the top. So, we came together and we thought, like, this would just be such a great, like, kind of a Devil Wears Prada, but for the wedding world. And so it is fiction, but it's loosely based on our career and things that I experienced. And you really just can't make this stuff up. It is a hoot.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah. And so you personally, I mean, you're talking about, you did all these over the top weddings of rich people, famous people. Did you start out like the character in this book, working for someone else?
I did. I fell into my job as a wedding planner right out of college. I was very fortunate. I was taking a sociology of weddings class my senior year, as one does. And I kind of started out like the main character in this book. I thought I was going to get married and just have my MRS degree, and things didn't work out. And so, that there is a little bit of truth in that. And a wedding planner came to that class and said she was hiring. She worked in Dallas. And I've always been like type A. I've loved planning. I love organizing things. And I was like, you know what? I don't have a job lined up. I'm just going to see what this is like. And one thing led to another. And I kind of, again, felt like that first job led to my second job, which was with a very large event planning firm in Dallas with a brilliant event designer. And it just like kind of grew from there. But that was back in the day where it was much easier to get into the industry. Mm-hmm. Although now you're looking to get in the industry, everyone is hiring because, again, events are back with a vengeance. But I feel very fortunate that I got in with the right people and learned from the best. And, it's not every day that your average wedding is $300,000. And that was kind of our average wedding. And of course it went much higher from there. So
yeah. Yeah. And in Dallas, I mean, $300,000, you can get a lot, right?
You definitely can. But, the venue alone, as I'm sure y'all talk about, the venues dictate a lot of your budget. I mean, you go into the Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons and half your budget's already gone for like a piece of chicken and a roll. So, it obviously, you kind of depends on where you're getting married, but the people in Dallas, like, more is more, less is a bore. And so it was really fun because it was like trial by fire. If you can survive the wedding world in New York or Dallas, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dallas weddings are huge. Like they have a lot
Massive.
of, yeah.
Everyone invites everyone. The venues there are also much bigger. That's a big difference between Dallas and Nashville. People are now starting to want to have really large weddings again. And we don't really have a lot of great venues for that. Dallas, all their venues hold so many people. So you can easily have a wedding for 500 people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you've worked with Lauren Kitchens of Fancy Cakes by Lauren. We had her on the podcast years ago.
So fabulous.
She's really fabulous. We adore Lauren. She was like our very first year she came on, and it was like, oh my God, she's like a big name. And she's like,
her cakes are, she's a celebrity baker. Her cakes are fantastic, and we used her all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that episode is called Fancy Fake Cakes by Lauren. We talked about how, there's fake layers. Yeah.
Yes.
So good. Okay. So this is a book based on kind of how you got in the industry and you got started. The main character seems like she's super driven, but she's willing to do this grunt work. And the guy that she's working for seems like over the top ridiculous. It's pretty hilarious. I've never, as a wedding planner myself, started my business in 2002. I've never worked for anybody else as a wedding planner. I've only done it myself. So I don't really know how other people do it. And I've done high-end weddings in Silicon Valley, but it's so different than Southern weddings.
Sure.
So I found it really, I'm like, oh, this is so interesting.
Lots of shenanigans. Yeah. And, the bigger the wedding, usually the more, obviously, the more that can go wrong, or the more you get crazy requests and that kind of thing. And, but it's fun. And I felt like, I did a lot of research into what was out there, and my goal wasn't to like burn anyone. Todd, if you Google me, you'll see I worked for Todd Events. is a genius. And
Yeah.
so we wanted to make sure that that point was put across in the book. And I mean, his character is like, I mean, he is nothing like the character in the book, except for the fact that he is a creative God. And
Yeah.
the parties that he would envision and build like out of his mind, there really is, it's a gift.
Yeah.
And so it was very cool to see that, but then actually making that vision happen is a whole other story. And so that's to me where the fun, kind of comes into play, is like, okay, now we have to make this, put clouds in the sky in the ballroom. Yeah. Okay, let's see how this is going to work.
Okay, well, I thought it was really real when there was a part in the book where your main character it's Abby, right? Lottie. Okay. Well, people call her Abby and Annie, and like, they don't care about what her real name is.
Yeah, they all mess up her name. So you're right.
And she's, it's summer, and she's waiting with this groom who wants to, quote, come out of a helicopter. And she's talking about how she smells so bad because she's been running around. She's sweating like crazy. You cannot stop. And I thought to myself, this is definitely a real wedding planner, writing this, because you stink. You stink. You're running around. You're going nuts. And it was hilarious. The freaking panty liners that somebody told her to put in her armpits.
That's actually a trick from my days of rushing and sororities, going through rush at TCU in the dead of summer, right before school starts. That was a trick that we learned, was the panty liner. But yes, to your point, I'm sure you had the same, like in one of the later chapters, she pulls a pair of flats out of her glove compartment. Mm-hmm. You start in heels, but you've got a pair of flats somewhere stowed away all the time. So I think that is what's cool, is that, yes, it's very authentic, because I lived these moments. And, now I can also speak from from the vendor perspective, because now I'm a vendor with Please Be Seated. And so, it's interesting to get feedback from people that worked in the wedding world that read the book. They're like, we love the book, but it also made me start sweating, because I was like having PTSD. Like, it was like way too close to real life. Yeah. And so that's been fun though, because I'm like, you know what? That's great. That means that I was authentic in my storytelling.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the panty liners I've never done, but that's a good trick. I have
the thin ones. You don't need a real thick one.
Yeah, and so the sticky part obviously goes on the dress, the sleeve.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
This is so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I've carried extra bras and panties so I could change. You're soaking wet.
Absolutely.
Powder, everything.
Absolutely. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, I've had a chafing dish full of like hot water spill all over me. So you're like, oh, no worries. I've got extra clothes in the car. And
right.
It's like, who else would have this kind of stuff? Oh, a wedding planner.
A wedding planner. Mm-hmm. A wedding planner, y'all. Okay. So your co-author, and really Asher Fogel Paul, right? And I spoke to her on an onboarding call, but I heard she's in London right now.
She is. Her husband is he's doing all the music for the new Snow White and Seven Dwarfs. He's very talented in his own right. So they have to live in London right now while he's doing that. So don't feel bad for her. Don't feel bad for her at all.
Yeah, because isn't he the composer, did the music for La La Land? Did I read that right? Yeah.
Correct. And Greatest Showman. And yes, he's very, very talented, which is also why it took us a while to write our novel, because she's gifted in her own right. But while we were writing this book, both of us were having babies. She was having to like go with her husband on the red carpet to accept an Oscar. So there were a few things at play, but yeah, their children are going to be geniuses, because they both are very talented in their own right. I'm very blessed to have her as a co-author. Yeah. And you and she went to college together. You were college roommates. We did. And we both were in journalism school together, but then she went off and pursued a proper journalism degree at Columbia. And I went and, helped brides change their underwear for a living. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is part of what we do. That's true. You have to be willing to say yes to anything. I know, it's so weird. But I love it. Very weird. Yeah. So these are your stories of wedding planning days and high-end events in the South. What do you think, Mary? What was your goal with this book? Like, what's the biggest takeaway, would you say? Sure. Really, I think just to, it's, to me, that whole wedding world, it's kind of everyone talks about wedding planning, or you read that it's like the top 5 most stressful jobs out there. It's like, you could be an EMT, a police officer, or a wedding planner. And I think people just don't understand what goes on behind the scenes. And so for me, it was like a peek behind the curtain, because I really love personally knowing what goes on behind the scenes with some of these really cool jobs. And there were all these great stories. And I thought, I never set out to write a book. I wasn't, I've never been one of those people that was like, I just want to write a book. But over the course of my career, I had all these great stories to tell. And so I thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to give people an inside look. And I love making people laugh. And I think especially right now, having some levity and laughter in life is so important. And so I've loved how the timing of this book and when it was released, like that was so important to me, was to just bring some joy and happiness and put a smile on people's faces, and also give them a look behind the scenes. Because while I say it's like it's fictional and it's inspired, but a lot of this, as you know, could be real life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a bit of not a tell-all, but just a really fun story for people to enjoy.
Yeah. And again, it's called Without a Hitch. It's really good.
Thank you.
So would you indulge us with some crazy stories, like off the top of your head? Like,
oh my goodness. There are so many, but the opening of the book, I will say, is true. That one I don't hide. The groom he did not parachute. The stunt double did not parachute. The groom didn't do anything. He did hide in the bushes, but the stunt double rappelled out of the helicopter into the ceremony venue.
Okay, wait, back up, because I read it, but basically what happened was the groom wanted his grand entrance to the ceremony.
Correct. And which is odd. Normally it's the bride that wants a grand entrance, if anything. And so, yes, he wanted a grand entrance. So he was hiding in the bushes, and we did have to time it perfectly because they played Mission Impossible music when it was, supposed to look like the groom wasn't there. So we had to time it perfectly with the start of the music, but you didn't want to hear the chopper yet. And what we did, we lined it all up, and the chopper came from a local air base, and the stunt double rappelled down into the bushes, and then the groom hopped out. Yes.
So, but he had a stunt double. So he hopped up. So I get it. The stunt double
landed in the bushes where the groom was hiding, and then the groom popped out with the backpack to look like the stunt double.
Yes. And nobody knew knew otherwise.
And to this day, he probably has still not told people it was not him.
Oh, really?
Yes. I mean, but then there's like things that aren't as massive, like, tips and tricks. And I think that this one was in this book. I can't remember. So, we held stories for the second novel, but
there's going to be a second novel.
Oh yeah, it's already done. It's in 2023. There's a sequel. Yes, we signed for 2 books.
Oh, that's
so when
great.
everybody, we left you hanging in the first so that you would read the second. But you learn all these tips and tricks that are so fun too, that I'm happy to, that is also real life. Like once we dropped, I'm giving you behind the scenes. We were setting up the chuppah for a Jewish ceremony, and we had this beautiful piece of glass. The bride and groom stomp on the piece of glass. There was a beautiful piece of glass that they brought over from Israel, and it's one of the interns dropped it and broke it before we had a chance to set it up. The bride and groom didn't know. I was panicking, and my boss at the time said, "Don't panic, scoop all those pieces up." So we saved all the blue glass. She went and got from the supply closet at the synagogue, got a light bulb, put it in the velvet bag, tied it up. The groom stomped on the light bulb, didn't know, and then we dumped those pieces out, put the blue glass pieces in. They never knew. And that's the kind of stuff that happens all the time.
Yeah.
That people just don't know. And, it's really, those are the things that I learned, and you have to be really quick on your feet. And, wedding planners are usually like probably the best. I mean, I swear during COVID, when they were trying to figure out the C word, how to get people vaccinated fast, I was like, you just need to hire a bunch of wedding planners, because we would get this done.
Yeah.
Or Chick-fil-A employees, one of the two. We would get it done so fast.
Yeah. Oh my God. How did they do that so fast at Chick-fil-A? I can't even believe it.
I don't know, but they really should have been running the COVID vaccination lines.
Yeah.
They really should have.
They should have done them at Chick-fil-A's.
Seriously. I know. That was a missed opportunity there.
It's a really good idea, Mary. Okay. That's funny though. The glass that you just did a switcheroo, and they have no idea to this day that wasn't the glass.
And that happens in a lot of instances. I mean, where we're subbing things out, or, your job is to obviously behind the scenes is total chaos, but you make the job, the event look super smooth. And I think that's what's fun for me is, you go to these weddings and something's always going to go wrong. It's just to what degree. And obviously if the guest is seeing it, then it's probably a large problem. But there's, so much that goes on behind the scenes, and the really good vendors and wedding planners, you never know about it. Or if you do, it's at the end of the event and it hasn't ruined the event.
Yeah.
So this is a little look at like what's happening behind the scenes. So it looks very calm in the front. We're like a mullet. It's a business in the front and a party in the back. I mean, I did throw a brick at a window trying to get into a car. That is also true.
Really? Whose car? Why?
The bride's. There was something locked in it. That is in the book as well. And that did really happen. And we threw a bunch of things at the windows. They never broke because it was like one of those pimped out Range Rovers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
But things like that. I mean, it's just so bizarre. I mean, you can't even imagine the things that I've seen too, like the X-rated things, this as well. I mean, you help brides with things that you should never, ever see or know about. And I'll take it to the grave. Or put it in my next novel. I'm just kidding.
Yes. Yeah. I think you should do that. So I'm curious, all these years that you were wedding planning, and even now probably maybe helping clients with the rental company with these big over the top weddings, we get so many listeners emailing, or I should say, I get so many listeners emailing me about family drama and dynamics and how weddings bring out the crazy. And I'm sure that over the years, like you've worked with and dealt with and had to help and mediate with couples and their parents or members of their wedding party. And it's always helpful for our listeners who are going through it right now. As an example, mom, oh my God, you know what? This is on my head right now. I have been watching Paris in Love. I don't know, Paris Hilton.
I have not been watching that, but is it good? Should I watch it?
It's good because you actually would probably
appreciate it. It's entertaining,
but she's very famous. She has a lot of money. She's a frigging Hilton.
Yes. Correct.
Her mother's Kathy Hilton, who it's crazy how she's like wanting to be so involved in the wedding planning, and mom is getting so irritated that the groom is so involved in the wedding planning and literally keeps saying, tell him to stay in his lane.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, like it's making me crazy. So when you have overbearing parents like that, have you dealt with those before?
Oh, absolutely. It does not matter how much money you're spending. A lot of money, whether you're having a $20,000 wedding or $2 million wedding, if it's a lot of money to you and your family, it's a lot of money. And when you mix that much money and emotion, because a wedding is very emotional for so many reasons, and bringing in that many family members, there's going to be drama. So wedding planners almost always act like a therapist. That's why it's really important. You want to hire somebody. You don't need to hire your best friend, but you want to hire somebody that you're very comfortable with. You obviously want to hire somebody that's very good. I actually speak to that in this blog post I was just telling you about, kind of tips on like what to look for when you're hiring a wedding planner, because that person's going to act as your liaison, not only to your vendors, but can be, a buffer for your family. And yes, grooms are always trying to overstep their boundaries unless they're paying for it. I think, at the end of the day, you do need to be respectful to the opinions of those who are paying for it, but also to the opinions of the people in general that are going to be your family long after this wedding is over. You have to remember, a wedding is one day, and while it's important, you are going to have a relationship with these people, Lord willing, for a very long time. So kind of knowing when to pick and choose your battles. That's what I always tell people. Like, what are you going to die on your sword for? And like really stand firm there. And then can you be flexible in other areas? So, everyone is going to have an opinion and drama, and it's just navigating really what is really important, who is paying for what, and being respectful of those opinions.
Yeah. And I think that, again, just going back to the whole, let's say, mother-daughter scenario, it gets so emotional and so much is brought into it. And I feel like when you're in this position as, in this case, the bride, being pulled between your mother and your fiance, it's kind of this new weird space to be in and to navigate through as you're planning this event of a lifetime of which you probably will never plan again, new experience. So it's really hard. And I love that this blog that you wrote about how to, what is it? How to hire a wedding planner or what to look for?
Tips from a wedding planner. Like kind of my overall thoughts on weddings, just like big things like where to spend your money, things like how to deal with family drama, and then also hiring a wedding planner. Mm-hmm. That's what it's about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's very normal. I think that's something too that's very comforting for people. I mean, even my brother-in-law got married at the end of last year. And I said, listen, the beginning of the wedding process is the most stressful because the guest list is usually one of the hardest things to agree on. And then the budget. But kind of once you get past those things, everything else, it's not, I mean, you're like picking out the cake and you're picking out the flowers. And as long as you're like staying within the budget, those things can be enjoyable. But no matter who you are or how much money you're spending, you're not alone in feeling like it's a lot. It is a lot of drama and work. And that's why people that think they don't need a wedding planner because they've planned other parties, I'm like, listen, this is not like any other party you've ever planned because of those things, because it's so much emotion, so many people, and so much money involved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. You having a party at your house or even at a restaurant, your mom's really not going to give a shit. She's going to come and bring you a gift and just hope there's good food and alcohol.
Absolutely. You're going to have another birthday or another birthday party to redo. You, like you said, hopefully you only have one wedding and you spend your whole life thinking about this wedding. And so you just it's a lot of pressure put onto one day. So, I think it's very important to hire a wedding planner for everything, all the reasons we just talked about. And this book is like an example of it. Like the Lottie and the firm she works for is saving the day all the time. Mm-hmm. Because no one knows what they're doing. I mean, you think you do, but it's not the same.
And at least a wedding planner knows a little bit. And if not, we pretend we figure it out.
100%. You're like, yes, absolutely. No problem. And then you go out, you pee your pants and you freak out. And then you figure out how to, put together the cake that the baker just dropped out of their car. You figure those things out.
So when you started out like Lottie, you were not married, but you thought you were getting married. Is that true?
I thought I might be getting married. Yes. And so I had a broadcast journalism degree, and I got a job offer from a podunk town is one that's, how everybody starts out, but I was kind of burnt out from it. And I was, again, thinking through my heart about this relationship. And I was like, do I really want to move and pursue this career? And around the time that I decided to turn down that job offer, we broke up. So I was kind of like, okay, well, what am I going to do next? And this was, again, it was just a blessing. And everyone was moving to Dallas from Fort Worth, kind of as you do. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to, I reached out to the wedding planner. She said, sure, just come work for me. You seem like you know what you're doing. I was faking it till I made it. And one thing led to another, and I was good at it and I really liked it. And you can attest to this, like wedding planners, we are like a breed in and of ourselves. Like not everybody can do this. And when I was working at Todd's, we got to a point when anybody wanted to intern with us, we made sure they looked good on paper, but then we would just have them meet us at a wedding. I didn't even bring them in often for a formal interview. And I never asked them to do anything that was, that they couldn't do, but you could tell very quickly if they were going to survive or not as a wedding planner. So
you would just be like, hey, I got a wedding on Saturday, show up at this time.
Show up. I mean, I would look at their resume and talk to them, but if they seemed qualified, I'd say, yes, meet us at the Crescent Hotel and we're going to see how you do. And you could tell very quickly if they were going to make it or not.
Oh, I love that. So they would assist you.
Yes, totally. And again, I'm not asking them to do anything crazy, but like we've been talking about, it's the art of the pivot. You've got to be able to pivot if you're a wedding planner. And some people are just quick on their toes and fast learners. And some people they aren't, or they're not great with clients. And again, wedding planners have to be comfortable talking to the guy setting up the porta potties. And we have to be really comfortable talking to the billionaire paying for the wedding. So you've got to have this kind of chameleon personality. There's all these things at play.
Mary, the guy setting up the porta potties is always very unique, isn't he?
He's actually usually very good looking.
Yes. Oh my God, that's so weird.
Isn't that weird? I know. We always wanted to go out and date the guy setting up the porta potty. None of the groomsmen. I'm like, that guy with the deluxe
what is with
that? A smoke show. I don't know. It was so weird. Yeah.
That is so weird. It's so funny that you said that. I've
I'm
never
just
heard
glad I'm not
anybody say that.
alone in those weird feelings. If we're having like a Schitt's Creek moment here.
Well, it's usually young too. They're usually young.
Yeah, I don't know, like the guys that do all the generators, the power.
Yes.
Like young, good-looking, strong guys from like, East Texas, and you're like, okay, like we're gonna make sure to hire you on our next event for sure.
Yeah, you're great.
I know, totally the best.
Yeah.
And do it with your shirt off next time.
Oh, you're bad. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna get sued now.
Yeah, we should be drinking wine. Okay, so where were we? You got me all like confused here.
You got to take your turtleneck off now.
Yeah, these crazy shenanigans. I know it's hot here. I mean, it's cold. These crazy shenanigans in weddings that happen. So Lottie, this is interesting because can you tell this part? I mean, will it be a spoiler alert that, she ends up planning whose wedding?
No, yeah. I mean, if it is, it is. No, because there's so much fun stuff in the book. You're not spoiling it. Yeah. So she ends up planning her ex-boyfriend's wedding, which is like the worst case scenario. Because her boyfriend turns out, he does go off and become a, superstar kind of and professional athlete. And so she ends up planning his wedding, and it's kind of about her journey, getting there, and then, how she deals with it. And I won't tell you all of that. But it's like, what would your nightmare situation be? And it's that your ex really makes it and is marrying a superstar herself. And then you have to plan their wedding. But a lot happens in Lottie's life through, leading to that actual moment.
Yeah.
And that's a fun part of the book.
That is a fun part of the book. That is.
I won't tell you how it all goes down.
No, don't tell me. I do need to finish listening. So I would love to hear your tips and those listening on just going back to that article you wrote about, hiring a wedding planner and what to look for. And, I'd also like to know your theory on one thing. And I know this is like a subject to talk about a lot, but I'm super passionate about it, is that as a wedding planner, we offer different services. I'm sure you didn't. I'm sure you only did full planning with these high-end weddings, but a lot of people do the full planning, the partial planning, what I call month of coordination, and people know this term day of coordination. It makes me a little crazy that some planners out there still use the term day of coordination. Did you ever do that, or have you heard of that? People using it where you are?
Yes, I've heard of it. We never did it, and I never will, and I don't advise it. Just speaking very frankly, I don't, I don't know any wedding planners personally that offer day of, because then you're just walking into probably like a circus that you're having to fix. I think you should at least hire a wedding planner, not even a month out. I think it really should be 3 months is unless your engagement is shorter than that. But, they really need to have time, even if it's just hourly, to advise you on things and make sure that you've hit all of the necessary things that you need, and like that your rental order is correct, that you haven't forgotten any of the major, things that you're not used to thinking about. The right table linens were ordered for the right size table. Also, like reviewing your bills and making sure you're not paying for something you really don't need. So that all needs to happen weeks leading up to the wedding, because at that point, usually month of or weeks out, you can't change any of your contracts, and you can't change what you've decided. And so even if they were to come in, it's too late to fix a lot of the problems other than just walking you down the aisle. And that to me is not even helpful at that point. So obviously they can manage anything that comes up on the wedding day. But again, I think in order for them to do the best job on the wedding day itself, you really need them to be involved weeks out, so that they can do their job on the day of the wedding. Because stuff comes up, even if we've been working with a client for over a year, there's still stuff that comes up right before the wedding that had nothing to do. Even if we had, crossed all of our T's and dotted all of our I's, you're still managing last minute, issues. So it's really impossible to have a planner that can take care of everything. I mean, it almost ends up, I would think people would say, like, we should have hired this person sooner.
Yeah, totally agree. I think also something that confuses people, and I even think that planners out there that are still using this term day of don't really just come in on the day of. My teacher, so I went to school, San Francisco State, and I actually got my certification as a wedding consultant there a long, long time ago. And my teacher had been a wedding planner since like the early 80s before anybody ever knew what a friggin' wedding planner did, right? Or what a wedding planner was. It wasn't even like a
No, it was
job
not a
code.
thing.
Like it
Yes,
wasn't a
sure,
thing.
sure.
And she, even back then, would drill into us, don't ever call yourself a day of coordinator. We have to stop using this term. It is absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense. And, you know, for those out there that hear this term day of coordinator, a month of coordinator at the least usually starts way more than a month out. We'll be there on the day of. You know,
Yeah, of
that's
course.
not what the job
That's a
is. It's not
given.
just
That's
showing up and
no.
being like, "Okay, let me help where I can."
Yeah, no.
You know, and you have a good point. Like, if we start those weeks before the wedding, a couple months before the wedding, there's still time before you're paying your final payment on those contracts, where we can say, whoa, 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 wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. This needs to change, or this doesn't sound right. Or, you know, why do you only have your photographer for 6 hours when you actually need him for 8 hours, or whatever it is. So
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I mean,
good.
even we get brides will send us, I mean, as a rental provider, we're the only group in town that still does diagrams for clients. If their wedding planner doesn't do them. And we will get clients that'll come from venues that'll say, okay, they said we can fit 300 people seated, blah, blah, blah. And we will show them the diagrams that we've done a million times for these weddings. We're like, actually, no, you can only get 270 people seated. I mean, and if you had a confirmed 300 people and like waited and didn't have us early on, you're in trouble. You can't seat that many people. Whereas a wedding planner would step in. So oftentimes, when, clients will come or people will ask me about it and they're like, well, the venue has somebody on site or the church has somebody on site. I'm like, that's great. They're there to manage those facilities. And oftentimes the ceremony coordinator at a church will run the ceremony. That is true. But oftentimes at a venue, you want them managing their catering team, their setup team. They're not going to ensure that the place cards are put at the right tables. Like, that's not their job. And sometimes people find that out too late and they're like, oh, well, who's going to do this then? And you're like, well, you need a wedding planner. That's not what we do. So I think it's just good to do your research and know exactly what people are offering and then decide, okay, what else do I need? And it's usually a wedding planner.
What would you advise someone listening who's looking into wedding planners, questions they should ask that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have thought to ask?
Absolutely. How long have you been doing this? How often have you worked at this venue? If you have a venue dead set in your mind, I mean, there were venues in Dallas that were like, I could have done blindfolded, like rinse and repeat. Like I knew that was going to be super easy. And so often you don't, their pricing is based on that too. And so, really making sure that they're experienced and then just also chat with them, because like I said before, you don't want somebody that you just think will be your best friend, but has maybe done 2 weddings before yours. But you want to get along with them and you want to feel like you're comfortable talking to them, but also knowing that like they have a backbone. And if, you have an issue with a vendor or you need them to go like get, work a deal for you, that you feel confident that they'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
And especially if you have a specific religion, Indian weddings are a whole category in and of themselves. And there are people that specialize in those weddings and you really should hire a specialist. And, if you're having a Jewish ceremony, again, we were very comfortable doing Christian, Jewish, non-denominational, Catholic, but just make sure that they have experience doing the kind of wedding that you want to have.
Yeah. Very good. Very, very good. Well, I feel like we talked a lot. We laughed a lot. That was fun.
Good.
And the book is great. I'm looking forward to finishing it. But I love where it's going already. And it's so nice and refreshing to hear something that I associate with so well as a wedding planner. But I think people just getting married, listening to these crazy shenanigans and these stories of these people, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this.
Totally.
So thank you so much for coming on and writing this book. It must have been fun for you too, just to kind of get this all out.
It was, it's a creative, I mean, it was such a fun outlet. for me to explain what I do. I mean, I have a friend who's a lawyer that I think it's fascinating. I always, when we go to dinner, I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me what cases you have going on, and he keeps the details and the clients, obviously, private, but this same thing. I mean, all these industries have such fun behind the scenes stories. That's why we like watching Grey's Anatomy. I mean, so you can really, for me, it was like, okay, you're getting a peek behind the scenes and what I think is interesting, but I also think anyone will find it interesting because when the stories are over the top, who doesn't want to read that?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Very, very good. Well, again, the book is called Without a Hitch. And Mary, I look forward to having you on again. I think we'll have fun.
I would love that. Please,
Well,
anytime.
yeah, we'll talk stories and rentals. Really, we should definitely talk rentals.
I would love that. I would love that.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, if I can talk about China glass and silver for 2 hours, we will be just fine.
Okay. All right. I don't know if we'll talk about just that, but
no, we won't.
we
No,
should
definitely
talk
not.
about-
Definitely not. I had to get very creative. We were folding napkins into swans by the end. I mean, it was,
Oh my
I was
God,
trying
swan-
to keep people energized.
You're juggling. Yeah.
Yeah, dishes.
Throwing linen over your were you doing
Totally.
a little play like it was a
Yes.
cape? Where can people find you?
Absolutely. Mainly Mrs. Southern Social on Instagram at Mrs. Southern Social.
Mhm.
And then there's a link to the blog, a link to the book. And then Please Be Seated too is really fun for the rental. If you just like, looking at pretty wedding pictures all the time.
Who doesn't love
But
that?
Mrs. Southern Social is the main hub where you'll know what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you again for having me. It was my pleasure.
All right. Bye.
Bye.